Hi everybody, I'm Eleanor Dixon, and today I'm going to read to you a little bit from the fourth book in the Tally and the Angel series. It's called The Sands of Time. It's very exciting because it takes place on a Greek island. Tally and her dad have gone for a holiday, and on the first day Tally meets a few of the local children. One of them is called Theo, and he invites her out the next morning to go sailing in his dinghy with him. That's where we're going to pick the story up. Okay, so next morning, Tally woke up as the rising sun tickled her cheeks with its first rays. Her room shared a balcony with her dad's, so she tiptoed to his balcony door to see if he was awake. Luckily, he had only pulled the wooden shutters halfway across and she could peep inside. Dad lay in dappled shade, sprawled across his mattress with the sheets scrunched around him. He was lying on his stomach and was fast asleep. Tally didn't have the heart to wake him. She would send him a text when she got to the beach and could ask Theo how long they would be. She crept back to her own room and put on a swimsuit with shorts and a t-shirt. Then she grabbed her towel and flip-flops and, totally forgetting her decision to send Dad a text, she pushed her mobile safely into the bedside drawer. She didn't want to lose it in the water. Satisfied she'd got everything she needed, she let herself out of her room and slipped out of the house. Apart from low voices and the clattering of utensils coming from the bakery across the road, the village was quiet. The cafes didn't open until 9 and the shops at 10, so there was no one around. Tally slipped down to the quay and shaded her eyes as she looked for Theo. He hadn't actually told her where to meet him, but it was a tiny harbour, more like a continuation of the beach, and she spotted him immediately, tinkering with a small painted wooden boat that he'd pulled up onto the sand. Artemis hadn't been exaggerating. It was only just big enough for two. Theo waved and called out, "Kalimera," which Tally knew meant good morning or good day. She waved back, then slipped off her flip-flops and ran barefooted across the sand to join him. He finished securing the tiny mast and waved towards the boat. "Meet Dawn." Tally stroked the varnished wood in admiration. "She's gorgeous, but it doesn't say Dawn here." She pointed to where a name was painted in swirly gold letters. "It says, something, I can't read it." "It says Aviki," Theo grinned, "which means dawn." "Which is much easier to say," Tally smiled back. Theo held out his hand. "Do you want to hop in, or help me push it out? You'll get wet, though." "I don't mind," Tally declared. "But first of all, how long will we be? I couldn't tell Dad where I was going, and I need to send him a message." Then the realization hit her and she banged her head with the heel of her hand. "I'm such a numpty. I've left my phone in the room." "Don't worry. We'll be back before your dad even knows you're gone," Theo said airily. "He won't have time to miss you." "And what does numpty mean? I never heard that word before." Tally explained as they pushed the little dinghy into the gently lapping water. She felt apprehensive about going off without telling Dad, but the turquoise sea looked so inviting. And if she wasted time running back, they might miss the breeze. Anyway, Theo said they wouldn't be long. She pushed aside her worries. Once they were knee-deep in the water and the boat was floating, they jumped in, and Theo hoisted the small sail. He rowed as well to get them going. Then there was just enough wind to carry them away from the shore and take them round the headland. Tally lifted her head to the clean, salty air and sighed happily as her hair flew out behind her in the breeze. As they sailed along, Theo pointed out a few things Tally hadn't been able to see from the village. "Look up," he said, pointing to the cliffs. Tally turned her head and saw a tiny church built into the dark rocks, so high up it needed hundreds of steps to get to it. Tally squinted at the white paint on the walls and steps, sparkled in the sunlight. At the highest point, though still in the protection of the cliffs, there was a bell tower with a bright blue domed roof that matched the church door. "How did they build anything so high?" she marvelled. Theo shrugged. "It's ridiculously old, too. Some saint built it after a shipwreck in the 1100s. There are loads of wrecked boats on the seabed below us. Here, where the water is shallower, they're mainly fishing boats, but over the wall there are some very ancient wrecks." He stared out to sea, and his voice fell almost to a whisper. "And some not so ancient." Tally glanced sideways at him as he sat in silence, looking towards where she supposed was the wall. Should she tell him she knew what had happened to his mum? She was about to open her mouth and speak when the boat gave a lurch. and the calm sea suddenly became choppy. Theo sucked in his breath and pulled a face. Then he began to gather in the little sail and fold down the mast. "Hold on tight," he commanded. He pulled the oars out from under the seat and locked them into place. "I think it's going to get a bit rough. We need to go back." A large wave hit the boat and threw Tally to the other side of the seat. She grabbed the rail and wedged herself between the bench and the side of the dinghy. Theo started rowing hard, his expression grim. Tally looked round. She hadn't realised how far they had sailed from the shore. She gripped the wooden seat harder and tried to squash her fear. The sea couldn't change that quickly, could it? It had been totally calm a minute ago. "Jophiel," she called in her mind. He would know. "I'm here, Tally." Instantly, Tally felt calm and comforted. Jophiel wouldn't let anything bad happen to her. They'd be all right. Then she saw Theo's eyes widen as he looked towards the horizon behind Tally. She whipped round and froze at the sight of a wave as high as a house hurtling towards them. Theo stood up and began to shout in Greek. It was as though he was angry with the sea itself. The water around the boat got rougher and more agitated till it was churning like boiling soup. Then the wave was upon them, but instead of engulfing them, it lifted the dinghy up to its crest and turned it over. Tally lost her grip. She flew through the air and opened her mouth to scream as she hit the frothing water. "Close your mouth, Tally," Jophiel cried. "Hold your nose, hold your breath." The raging sea tossed Tally one way and another. She could barely stay afloat, and she gasped in short, desperate breaths between waves slapping her in the face or currents trying to drag her down into the depths. She could no longer see the dinghy or Theo. With Jophiel's encouragement, she kicked and fought to stay afloat, but wave after wave smothered her, and she was so tired. "Jophiel," she cried, as her tired legs refused to kick any more, and she began to sink. Suddenly, Jophiel let out a mighty bellow. "Poseidona!" he roared. "I invoke your debt to me. Save this earth child." Tally felt herself sink lower and lower. The water was in her eyes, in her nose, in her ears, and in her mouth. Thoughts rushed through her head. Why hadn't she told Dad where she was going? She couldn't hold her breath any more. "Jophiel," she called once more in her mind. Well, if you'd like to know what happens and whether Tally gets out of this predicament, it's Tally and the Angel, The Sands of Time. And you can buy it from the book Dragon in ebook or paperback.